What if one of the strangest military legends of the 20th century was not born in a laboratory, but in the darkness between science and fear? What if, during the most violent war humanity had ever known, the United States Navy attempted something so extreme, so unnatural, so far beyond the imagination of ordinary men, that even today the story refuses to die? A warship, a silent ocean, a field of invisible energy, a green mist rising like a wound in reality. And then, before the eyes of stunned witnesses, an entire vessel vanishing from the face of the sea. The story has been called many names: a hoax, a misunderstanding, a classified experiment, a myth created by unstable minds. But to others, it remains something far more disturbing: a possible glimpse into a forbidden frontier of physics, where electricity, magnetism, gravity, light, and space itself may have touched for one terrifying moment. This is the legend of the Philadelphia experiment, and at the center of it, like a shadow cast across history, stands a name that still electrifies the imagination of the world: Nikola Tesla. Tesla was not merely an inventor of machines. He was a man who believed the universe was alive with invisible forces. To him, electricity was not just power, it was language. Vibration was not just motion, it was law. The Earth itself was not a dead stone drifting through space, but a giant resonant body, a planetary conductor, a sleeping engine waiting for humanity to understand its hidden design. And so, when people hear the claim that Tesla may have been connected to a secret wartime experiment involving invisibility, electromagnetic fields, and perhaps even the bending of space and time, the story becomes almost impossible to ignore. But did it happen? Did the U.S. Navy truly attempt to make a ship disappear in 1943? Was the destroyer escort USS Eldridge transformed into a weapon of invisibility? Were sailors injured, disoriented, or even fused into the metal of their own ship? And did Tesla, in the final year of his life, discover something so dangerous that he withdrew from the project before it was too late? There is no final proof. There are contradictions, denials, strange letters, suspicious deaths, impossible claims, and official explanations that leave many people unsatisfied. But one fact remains: the mystery survived. And sometimes, the mysteries that survive are not the ones with the clearest evidence. They are the ones that touch something deeper: our fear of what governments may hide, our fascination with lost science, our suspicion that the invisible world is far more powerful than the visible one, and our haunting question: what if the greatest machines of the future were imagined long before humanity was ready to control them? To understand the Philadelphia experiment, we must enter a world of war, secrecy, electromagnetic dreams, and one of the most controversial legends ever connected to modern science. And the story begins not in 1943, but with a book, a mysterious letter, and a man who may have opened a door he could never close. In 1955, a writer and astronomer named Morris K. Jessup published a book called The Case for the UFO. Jessup was interested in the possibility that advanced technology, perhaps even technology not originating on Earth, had influenced human history. His book explored the idea that unidentified flying objects might be real, and that the strange machines reported by witnesses could be evidence of sciences far beyond anything officially known at the time. In the years after the Second World War, America was living in a fever dream of technology and fear. The atomic bomb had already changed the meaning of human power. Rockets were rising from military test ranges. Radar had transformed warfare. Jet aircraft were breaking the old limits of speed. And in 1947, the Roswell incident had burned the image of crashed alien machines into the American imagination. Science fiction was no longer just entertainment. It felt like prophecy. People looked up at the night sky and wondered whether the future was approaching from the stars. So when Jessup wrote about UFOs, ancient mysteries, and advanced technology, he found an audience ready to listen. Then, in January of 1956, Jessup received a letter from a man who called himself Carlos Miguel Allende. The letter was strange from the beginning. Allende claimed to admire Jessup's work. He said he agreed with Jessup's ideas about advanced technology and the possibility that humanity had received knowledge from beyond its normal development. But then the letter turned darker. Allende claimed that in 1943, during World War II, the United States Navy had conducted a secret experiment in Philadelphia. According to him, this experiment had involved a warship and a powerful electromagnetic field. The purpose, he said, was to make the ship invisible, not merely hidden from radar, not simply camouflaged, invisible. Allende claimed he had witnessed a USS Navy vessel disappear from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, vanish from view, and then appear hundreds of miles away near Norfolk, Virginia, before returning again to Philadelphia. If true, it would have meant something far greater than stealth technology. It would have implied that military scientists had discovered a way to manipulate light, electromagnetic waves, and perhaps space itself. Jessup was astonished. The claim sounded impossible, but the details were too unusual to dismiss casually. Allende wrote as if he were not inventing a story, but confessing something he had carried for years. His language was erratic, his grammar unusual, his thoughts sometimes difficult to follow. Yet inside the confusion was a narrative so powerful that it began to take hold of Jessup's mind. The name eventually attached to this story was the Philadelphia Experiment, and according to the legend, it was also known by another code name, Project Rainbow. That name alone has become part of the myth. Rainbow, a bridge of light, a spectrum of hidden frequencies, a symbol of energy divided into colors, just as reality itself might be divided into forces. Some researchers believe the name was connected to secret wartime projects. Others argue it was later attached to the story to make it sound more credible. But in the mythology of the Philadelphia Experiment, Project Rainbow became the doorway into a new kind of warfare. A warfare not of bullets and bombs alone, but of fields, waves, resonance, and invisible force. To understand why such a story could emerge in 1943, we must return to the world at war. The Second World War was not only a conflict of armies, it was a conflict of laboratories. Every major power was searching for a technological advantage that could decide the fate of nations. Germany was building rockets and advanced submarines. Britain was developing radar systems and code-breaking machines. The United States was racing toward atomic power. In the Atlantic, German U-boats had become one of the most terrifying weapons of the war. They hunted Allied ships beneath the surface of the ocean, striking convoys with torpedoes and disappearing before retaliation could come. To the sailors crossing the Atlantic, the ocean was no longer open water. It was a vast, dark machine of death. The United States needed ways to protect its ships. It needed better radar, better sonar, better camouflage, better detection, better countermeasures, and any technology that might give its vessels an advantage over German submarines and aircraft. This is the historical soil from which the Philadelphia Experiment legend grows. According to the story told by Allende, the U.S. Navy wanted to create a ship that could not be detected by enemy systems. The original objective may have been to make the vessel invisible to radar, not necessarily to the human eye. But as legends often do, the story expanded. Radar invisibility became optical invisibility. Optical invisibility became teleportation. Teleportation became time distortion. And soon the tale was no longer merely about hiding a ship. It was about breaking the boundaries of physical reality. The alleged scientific foundation behind the experiment was said to involve Albert Einstein's unified field theory. Einstein spent much of his later life searching for a mathematical framework that could unite the fundamental forces of nature. He wanted to bring gravity and electromagnetism into a single, elegant structure, a set of equations that might reveal the deeper order behind the universe. In simple terms, he was searching for unity, a hidden architecture beneath the chaos, a way to show that forces appearing separate might actually be expressions of one deeper law. The Philadelphia Experiment legend claims that the Navy somehow obtained or used ideas connected to this unfinished theory. According to the theory within the myth, if gravity and electromagnetism could be unified or manipulated together, perhaps a powerful electromagnetic field could bend light around an object, distort perception, or alter the object's relationship to space. This is where the story becomes scientifically controversial. There is no accepted evidence that Einstein completed such a theory in a form usable for naval invisibility. There is also no credible proof that the Navy used such equations for a secret experiment on a destroyer escort. But myths do not survive on evidence alone. They survive because they resemble something we fear might be possible. And in this case, the fear was simple. If the forces of nature could be unified, then perhaps they could also be weaponized. According to the legend, Einstein's mathematics were not enough. The Navy needed someone who understood electricity not only as a subject of study, but as a living force. And this is where Nikola Tesla enters the story. Tesla's real achievements were already astonishing. He helped shape the modern world through alternating current systems, high-voltage experiments, radio-related technologies, electric motors, and his lifelong obsession with wireless transmission of energy. Tesla believed that nature operated through frequency and resonance. He saw the universe as a vast electrical system, filled with vibrations that could be measured, amplified, and perhaps controlled. His dream of wireless power was not merely an engineering project, it was a vision of civilization transformed. One of the most famous symbols of that vision was Wardenclyffe Tower. Built on Long Island, Wardenclyffe was intended as a massive wireless transmission station. Tesla imagined using the Earth and atmosphere as parts of a resonant electrical system. He believed energy and information could be transmitted across great distances without wires, if only humanity learned how to tune itself to the natural electrical properties of the planet. To Tesla, power did not need to be dragged through copper cables like water through pipes. It could move through fields, through the air, through the earth, through resonance. This is why the Philadelphia experiment legend attaches itself so easily to his name. If anyone in the public imagination could have imagined a machine capable of surrounding a ship with a powerful electromagnetic field, it was Tesla. Some versions of the story claim that Tesla had been brought into the project because of his expertise in electromagnetic systems. They suggest that he designed or inspired the generators, coils, and field-producing devices that would be installed aboard the USS Eldridge. According to this interpretation, the ship would be surrounded by an intense electromagnetic envelope. This field would act like an invisible cloak, bending radar waves or perhaps even light itself around the vessel. To the enemy, the ship would disappear. To instruments, it would become a ghost. To human eyes, it might dissolve into fog and energy. But then comes one of the strangest details in the legend. Tesla allegedly withdrew from the project before the final experiment. Why? Some believers suggest he realized the technology was too dangerous. They argue that Tesla understood something other scientists did not, that an electromagnetic field powerful enough to affect light and matter might also damage living tissue, disrupt the nervous system, or destabilize the relationship between the human body and the surrounding environment. There is no verified historical record proving Tesla worked on the Philadelphia experiment. There is no reliable document showing he designed equipment for the USS Eldridge, and Tesla died on the 7th of January 1943, months before the alleged October test date most often associated with the story. Still, his name remains tied to the mystery because his real ideas were so far ahead of his time that later generations found it easy to imagine him standing behind impossible machines. Tesla became more than a man. He became a symbol of forbidden electricity, the genius who listened to lightning, the inventor who believed the earth itself could be made to sing, and in the Philadelphia experiment legend, that symbolic Tesla becomes the perfect architect for a machine that should never have been built. The vessel chosen for the alleged experiment was said to be the USS Eldridge, designation DE-173. The Eldridge was a Cannon-class destroyer escort, a relatively small and maneuverable warship built during the Second World War. Compared with larger battleships, cruisers, or aircraft carriers, a destroyer escort was more practical for experimental modification. It was large enough to carry heavy equipment, but not so strategically irreplaceable that its loss would cripple the fleet. According to the story, this made it an ideal test subject, a military laboratory disguised as a ship, a steel body ready to be wrapped in artificial lightning. The alleged equipment installed aboard the Eldridge included massive electromagnetic generators, specialized coils, power systems, and devices capable of producing a field far stronger than anything normally used on a vessel. Some versions describe Tesla coils, others describe rotating magnetic generators, others mention degaussing equipment, a real wartime technology used to reduce a ship's magnetic signature and protect it from magnetic mines. This is important because degaussing was real. During World War II, ships were fitted with electrical cables that produced magnetic fields to counteract the vessel's natural magnetism. The purpose was not invisibility, but protection. Magnetic mines could detect a ship's magnetic field and explode. Degaussing reduced that risk. To an outsider, especially someone unfamiliar with naval technology, a ship covered in strange cables and electrical equipment might have seemed mysterious. The hum of generators, the smell of ozone, the vibration of power systems, the secrecy of wartime testing. It is not difficult to imagine how a real electromagnetic procedure could become, over time, a legend of invisibility. But the Philadelphia experiment story goes much further. According to the legend, the first phase of the project involved selecting and preparing the vessel. The second phase was the activation of the electromagnetic system. The goal: to make the USS Eldridge vanish from enemy radar. But if the stories are to be believed, the experiment exceeded its original purpose. The ship did not merely hide, it disappeared. The 28th of October 1943. That is the date most often given for the alleged final experiment. The scene is the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The USS Eldridge sits in the water, fitted with equipment that, according to the legend, should have remained unknown to history. The generators are prepared. The coils are energized. The crew is aboard. Engineers, officers, and observers wait for the moment when theory becomes reality. Then the machines begin to awaken. A low vibration moves through the hull. A hum rises from the electrical systems. Metal trembles under the force of invisible fields. The air seems to change. Then, witnesses allegedly see a strange greenish mist forming around the ship. Not smoke, not steam. Something luminous, something unnatural. The color green appears again and again in retellings of the story, as if the ship were being swallowed by an aurora rising from the sea itself. In the Tesla-inspired imagination, one might picture the vessel suspended inside a violent electrical envelope, its steel body caught between magnetic pressure and radiant force. Then, in a moment that would become the heart of the legend, the USS Eldridge vanishes. Not slowly, not gradually, but suddenly. One moment, a warship. The next, empty water. According to Allende's claim, the ship appeared minutes later near Norfolk, Virginia, roughly hundreds of miles away. Then it vanished again and returned to Philadelphia. If this were true, the implications would be staggering. It would not merely suggest radar invisibility. It would suggest teleportation, the displacement of a massive object across physical space, a rupture in ordinary distance, a violation of everything human beings believed about matter, motion, and time. But the alleged miracle carried a terrible cost. When the ship returned, the sailors were not celebrating. They were suffering. Some were said to be violently ill. Others were disoriented, burned, traumatized, or unable to remember what had happened. The most horrifying claims say that some crewmen were fused into the metal structure of the ship, their bodies embedded in bulkheads or decks, as though flesh and steel had lost the boundary between them. Other accounts describe sailors trapped between dimensions, unable to interact normally with the world around them. These details are almost certainly legendary. There is no verified evidence that such injuries occurred aboard the USS Eldridge, but as a story, the image is unforgettable. Men trapped inside the machine they had trusted. Human bodies caught in an experiment meant for metal, not flesh. A warning that nature's invisible forces may tolerate mathematics, but not arrogance. For Morris Jessup, the letters from Carlos Allende became a source of fascination and unease. Jessup wanted more information. Who was this man? What had he truly seen? Was he a witness, a deceiver, or someone caught between fact and delusion? Allende continued to write. Over time, the details became stranger. At one point, the name attached to the letters shifted from Carlos Allende to Carl Allen, raising further questions about identity and credibility. Then the story took another unusual turn. The Office of Naval Research received a mysterious package. Inside was a copy of Jessup's book, The Case for the UFO. But this was not an ordinary copy. The margins were filled with strange handwritten notes. The annotations discussed advanced physics, alien technology, secret knowledge, and the Philadelphia experiment. The writing appeared to involve multiple voices or styles, and the grammar was unusual, almost coded. To some, it looked like the work of a disturbed mind. To others, it looked like fragments from a hidden conversation. The Office of Naval Research took enough interest in the annotated book to contact Jessup. When he examined it, he reportedly noticed similarities between the handwriting and the letters he had received from Allende. This deepened the mystery. Why had someone sent the Navy a marked-up copy of Jessup's own book? Was it a warning? A prank? A psychological game? Or an attempt to force the Philadelphia experiment into official attention? Jessup was asked to discuss the annotations and the claims surrounding the alleged experiment, but he could not provide definitive answers. He did not know who had written all the notes. He could not prove Allende's claims. He could only point to the strange correspondence he had received. From there, the mystery became heavier. Jessup continued investigating the story, but the more he searched, the less stable the ground beneath him seemed to become. Then, in 1959, Morris Jessup was found dead in his car. The official conclusion was suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. Investigators believed a hose connected to the exhaust had filled the vehicle with deadly fumes. Reports suggested Jessup had been depressed and under personal stress, but not everyone accepted that explanation. People close to Jessup claimed he had recently been pursuing new information about the Philadelphia experiment. Some accounts say he had spoken of important conclusions and intended to meet with a colleague before his death. To skeptics, these details do not prove foul play. To believers, they are impossible to ignore. A man investigates a secret experiment. He receives strange letters. A mysterious annotated book reaches the Navy. Then he dies before the story can be resolved. Once again, the Philadelphia experiment moves from science into shadow, and shadows are where legends grow. After Jessup's death, researchers eventually identified Carlos Allende as Carl Meredith Allen, a man born in Pennsylvania in 1925. Allen had served in the merchant marine or naval-related service during the era of World War II, depending on the account. Later descriptions of him often portray him as eccentric, unstable, or mentally troubled. Some researchers concluded that he had invented the entire story, perhaps for attention, perhaps out of delusion, or perhaps because he had misunderstood something real and transformed it into fantasy. This is one of the strongest skeptical explanations. If the entire Philadelphia experiment legend rests primarily on the letters of one unreliable man, then the foundation is extremely weak. There are no confirmed Navy records proving that the USS Eldridge vanished, no verified list of wounded sailors matching the alleged effects, no credible technical documentation showing a successful invisibility or teleportation experiment, no official evidence connecting Tesla to the project. And yet, the story did not disappear. In fact, it returned. Decades later, another man entered the legend, Alfred Bielek. Bielek claimed that he had been involved in the Philadelphia experiment and later in the Montauk Project, another alleged secret government program often linked to time travel, mind control, and exotic technology. According to Bielek, the experiment's true purpose was to make a ship disappear from radar, but the field created around the vessel became far more powerful than expected. He claimed that the USS Eldridge became invisible not only electronically but physically. He described green mist, electrical discharges, equipment failure, and chaos aboard the ship. He said the crew suffered horrifying effects. He claimed that the experiment opened a kind of hole or distortion, and that he and others experienced events far beyond ordinary physics. To believers, Bielek's testimony seemed to confirm Allende's story. To skeptics, it made the legend even less credible. His claims were extraordinary, but evidence remained absent. And this is the repeating pattern of the Philadelphia experiment. A witness appears, the story becomes more dramatic, the mystery expands, but the proof never arrives. Still, the question lingers, why do people keep returning to this legend? Perhaps because it sits at the intersection of several powerful human fears. The fear that governments conduct experiments beyond public knowledge. The fear that science, when militarized, can outrun morality. The fear that human beings may unlock forces they do not understand. And the fear that reality itself may be less stable than it appears. Par neuf. The role of Nikola Tesla remains one of the most powerful elements of the entire legend. According to some versions, Tesla helped design the electromagnetic equipment for the project, then withdrew after realizing the danger to the sailors. After his death, John von Neumann, the brilliant mathematician and physicist, allegedly replaced him and continued the work. This version creates a dramatic contrast. Tesla as the visionary who sensed the moral danger, von Neumann as the mathematical mind who pushed forward, Einstein as the theoretical architect whose equations opened the door, the Navy as the institution willing to turn invisible forces into weapons. It is a compelling story, but compelling does not mean proven. Historically, Tesla died in January 1943. The alleged experiment is usually dated to October 1943. For Tesla to have directly participated in the final test, the timeline does not work. Some believers respond by claiming he contributed earlier designs or theories before his death, but again, no confirmed documentation supports this. There are also problems with the science. Einstein's search for a unified field theory was real, but it did not produce a practical method for making ships invisible or teleporting objects. Electromagnetism can influence charged particles and interact with light under certain conditions, but bending visible light around a massive object like a warship would require materials and field control far beyond anything available in the 1940s. Modern stealth technology does exist, but it works through shaping, radar-absorbing materials, and signal management. It does not make objects vanish from physical reality. Quantum teleportation exists in physics, but it involves the transfer of quantum information between particles, not the transportation of large objects like ships and crews. In other words, the Philadelphia experiment, as commonly told, does not fit known science, but it does fit the mythology of Tesla. Tesla's public image is filled with high-voltage arcs, wireless power, secret notebooks, unfinished inventions, government interest, and the feeling that some of his ideas were too advanced for his own century. This image gives the Philadelphia experiment an emotional engine. When Tesla's name enters the story, the impossible begins to feel almost imaginable. Not proven, not confirmed, but imaginable. Because Tesla devoted his life to invisible forces that ordinary people could not see, but modern civilization could not live without. Electricity, frequency, resonance, magnetism, energy moving through fields. And perhaps that is why the legend still attaches itself to him. It is not because history proves he made a ship disappear. It is because his life makes us wonder what else might have been possible. The United States Navy has repeatedly denied that the Philadelphia experiment ever occurred. According to the Navy, the USS Eldridge was never involved in any invisibility or teleportation test. The ship's logs and official records do not support the claim that it was in Philadelphia on the date of the alleged experiment. In fact, records place the vessel elsewhere during key moments in the story. The Navy has also explained that some elements of the myth may have been inspired by real wartime technologies. One of these was degaussing, the process of reducing a ship's magnetic signature to protect it from magnetic mines. Another was camouflage. During World War I and World War II, navies used visual deception techniques to confuse enemy observers. One famous method was dazzle camouflage. Instead of trying to make a ship blend into the sea, dazzle camouflage used bold, geometric patterns to distort the enemy's perception of the ship's size, direction, speed, and distance. This was especially useful against submarines. A U-boat commander looking through a periscope had only moments to estimate a target's course and fire a torpedo. If the ship's painted patterns made that estimation more difficult, the vessel had a better chance of survival. This kind of camouflage did not make ships invisible, but it did make them harder to understand. And in war, confusion can be a weapon. It is possible that stories of experimental camouflage, degaussing equipment, radar countermeasures, and secret naval procedures became distorted over time. A real ship modified with unusual electrical systems could become, in rumor, an invisible ship. A classified test could become a teleportation event. A misunderstood technology could become a doorway through space. The official explanation is simple. The Philadelphia experiment was a hoax, a legend, or a misunderstanding. But to many people, official explanations are rarely enough, especially when secrecy is involved, especially when the story includes sudden death, strange letters, and claims of suppressed science. The more the Navy denied the experiment, the more some believers became convinced that the denial itself was part of the cover-up. This is the paradox of secret history legends. Evidence against them can become evidence for them. Silence becomes suspicious. Contradiction becomes concealment. Missing records become proof that records were destroyed. And so the Philadelphia experiment survived not because it was confirmed, but because it could not be emotionally buried. Even if the Philadelphia experiment did not happen as described, the scientific questions behind it remain fascinating. Could a ship ever be made invisible? Could electromagnetic fields hide an object from radar? Could light be bent around matter? Could space be manipulated? Could teleportation ever move something larger than a particle? The first and most realistic form of invisibility is radar stealth. Modern aircraft and ships can be designed to reduce their radar signature. Their surfaces can be shaped to deflect radar waves away from the source. Their materials can absorb portions of incoming radar energy. Their heat, noise, and electromagnetic emissions can be managed. This does not make them vanish. It makes them harder to detect. In military terms, that is already powerful. The second form is optical camouflage. Researchers have experimented with cameras, screens, adaptive materials, and metamaterials to make objects blend into their surroundings. Some concepts attempt to capture the image behind an object and display it on the front, creating the illusion of transparency. Other theoretical approaches involve materials that guide light around an object. This is closer to the dream of invisibility, but it remains limited. Small-scale demonstrations exist, but making a large warship fully invisible to the human eye in open conditions remains far beyond practical modern capability. The third form is true light-bending cloaking. In theory, if one could guide electromagnetic waves perfectly around an object and then reassemble them on the other side, the object might become invisible at certain wavelengths. This is where metamaterials become important. They can interact with waves in unusual ways, sometimes producing effects not found in ordinary materials. But again, there is a huge gap between laboratory effects and a destroyer escort disappearing from a naval shipyard in 1943. The fourth and most extreme idea is teleportation. In quantum physics, teleportation does not mean what science fiction often suggests. It does not move a person or object through space. It transfers quantum information between particles using entanglement and classical communication. That is extraordinary. But it is not the USS Eldridge jumping from Philadelphia to Norfolk. To teleport a ship, one would have to record, transmit, and reconstruct the complete physical state of an enormous object, including every atom, every molecule, every living cell, every electrical process in every brain aboard. Known science offers no practical path to this. Not in 1943. Not today. And yet, the Philadelphia experiment forces us to confront a haunting distinction. Some things are impossible because nature forbids them. Others are impossible only because humanity has not yet learned the correct question. Tesla understood this difference better than most. He knew that every age mistakes its current ignorance for final truth. He knew that invisible forces once considered mysterious could become the foundation of civilization. But he also knew that power without wisdom could become catastrophe. That is why the Philadelphia experiment, whether hoax or hidden history, still functions as a warning. The danger is not only that man may fail to control nature, the danger is that he may briefly succeed. The cultural power of the Philadelphia experiment grew far beyond the original letters. Books were written about it. Films dramatized it. The 1984 movie The Philadelphia Experiment brought the legend to a wider audience, turning the alleged wartime invisibility test into a cinematic story of time travel, government secrecy, and displaced men caught between eras. A sequel followed in 1993, further expanding the myth into popular science fiction. Online forums, radio shows, conspiracy communities, documentaries, and mystery channels kept the story alive. Each generation rediscovered it in a slightly different form. For some, it was a UFO-related mystery. For others, it was a military cover-up. For others, it was a lost Tesla technology. For others, it was a story about time travel. The legend became flexible, absorbing the fears and fascinations of each era. During the Cold War, it reflected anxiety about secret weapons. During the UFO boom, it became linked to alien technology. During the rise of internet conspiracies, it became part of a larger network of hidden projects, suppressed inventions, and classified experiments. But underneath all these versions is the same central image. A ship disappears. That image is powerful because a ship is not a small thing. It is steel, machinery, weapons, crew, mass, identity, and national power. A ship belongs to the visible world. It is meant to be tracked, named, recorded, commanded. To make such a thing vanish is to insult reality itself. And when reality appears to fail, the human mind searches for meaning. Maybe it was advanced science. Maybe it was alien intervention. Maybe it was government deception. Maybe it was collective imagination. Maybe it was nothing more than a story born from confusion and amplified by fear. But the mystery endures because each explanation leaves something behind. A residue, a vibration, a faint electrical hum in the dark. So what truly happened? The most responsible answer is that there is no verified evidence that the Philadelphia experiment occurred in the dramatic way the legend describes. The USS Eldridge was a real ship. World War II electromagnetic research was real. Degaussing was real. Radar, countermeasures, and camouflage were real. Einstein's search for unified field theory was real. Tesla's obsession with electricity, resonance, and wireless power was real. But the disappearance of a warship, its teleportation to Norfolk, and the horrifying fusion of sailors into metal remain unsupported by reliable evidence. The story rests largely on unstable testimony, strange correspondence, later claims, and decades of speculation. And yet, dismissing the story completely does not erase its power, because the Philadelphia experiment is not only a question of whether one ship vanished in 1943, it is a question about the boundary between invention and myth, between government secrecy and public imagination, between what science can do and what people fear science may do when hidden behind military walls. It asks whether the invisible forces Tesla studied might one day be used in ways that disturb the moral order of civilization. It asks whether the pursuit of power can outrun the wisdom required to guide it. It asks why certain stories, even when denied, continue to feel unfinished. Perhaps the USS Eldridge never disappeared. Perhaps Carlos Allende created a fiction that escaped his control. Perhaps Morris Jessup was drawn into a mystery that consumed him because he wanted the universe to be stranger than it appeared. Perhaps Tesla had nothing to do with the alleged experiment at all. But the deeper mystery remains. Why does the story still call to us? Maybe because we already know that the visible world is only a thin surface. Radio waves pass through us. Magnetic fields surround us. Electricity animates our nerves. Gravity bends the paths of worlds. Light carries information across the universe, and every solid object, no matter how permanent it appears, is made mostly of emptiness held together by forces we do not see. Tesla understood that civilization is built upon the invisible. The Philadelphia experiment legend takes that truth and turns it into a nightmare in which invisible forces are no longer merely studied, but unleashed. In the end, the Philadelphia experiment remains suspended between history and myth, too strange to accept without proof, too persistent to forget. It is a story of a warship that may never have vanished, a technology that may never have existed, and a scientific frontier that still tempts the imagination. It is also a story about Nikola Tesla's shadow, not necessarily Tesla, the documented historical man, but Tesla, the symbol, the prophet of electricity, the dreamer of wireless power, the man who believed nature's hidden vibrations could transform the world. If Tesla teaches us anything, it is that the universe is not silent. It speaks in waves. It moves in fields. It trembles with frequencies beyond ordinary perception. But if the Philadelphia experiment teaches us anything, it is that not every door should be opened before humanity is ready to understand what waits on the other side. Was the USS Eldridge ever wrapped in a field of artificial lightning? Did sailors look out from the deck and see reality dissolve into green fire? Did a naval experiment accidentally touch the machinery of space and time? Or was the entire legend born from rumor, fear, and the imagination of men living in the atomic dawn? There are too many questions, too few answers, and somewhere between them lies the reason this mystery has survived for more than 80 years. Because the question is not only whether the ship disappeared, the question is whether humanity, in its hunger for power, once tried to command forces it did not understand, and then spent the rest of history pretending it never happened.